times, right? So talent is in really short supply everywhere, and that talent pool is global. It's kind of been some of the themes of previous sessions. What we've seen in the employee base and talent base is the last 2 years have accelerated what was already happening, which was I want work to fit into my life and not the other way around. So we've seen this kind of change in power, if that's the right word, in terms of relationships between talent and those that want to engage talent. So we're seeing more and more organizations are being asked the question, I want to work for you, but these are my terms. And often those terms are living in a country that is not the same as where the role is, and that's what we're going to explore.
This element around the talent market being very competitive is very true, especially in our industry, in the SaaS space particularly. There's a huge demand for talent, and there are lots of competitors who offer very competitive packages as well to employees. But I think the focus has shifted a lot from an employee's perspective around the culture of the company that they'd like to be a part of, and having that flexibility to work from everywhere. I'm sure everyone must have heard about Airbnb recently, who decided to open up the opportunities for their employees to work from anywhere in the world. And we're seeing a lot more businesses think in that direction. And definitely at our company, at Klaviyo, the conversation is certainly shifting more towards, okay, how do we offer maximum flexibility to our employees while driving and making sure we are building the infrastructure that can allow them to work from anywhere in the world, just so that we can tap into those specific regions and those specific areas where the talent is based, but we are not. So it's definitely a journey, and I think I would certainly see that the SaaS industry will evolve in that direction, because that's how the employees are thinking, and that's what the talent actually wants in the market.
I think our focus primarily has previously been tax, and whether it's income or corporate, and the area that we definitely overlooked before was the labour and employment. Yeah. I don't think any of us have, definitely from a mobility perspective, we just assume that when you go to another country, if you're assigned there, you're potentially able to keep your home country entitlements and packages exactly the same for a short period of time. But when this remote working comes into play, it doesn't necessarily work, and that's the real challenge that Dino, we are facing at the moment, and trying to make it work in some of these countries where the labour laws are much stricter than the UK, or whichever country that people are working from, is something that our business and our HR doesn't really understand. And I think they believe that we're being difficult because it's not something that they've come across before, because they've only ever heard immigration tax. And with most of these remote working requests that we tend to see, where people are going back to their country of origin, immigration may not necessarily be the issue. So people think, yes, move people, any tax, we'll make it work. But that is what's really stinging us right now, because we as mobility don't necessarily have that knowledge either. And so it's something that we as a team are really looking to partner with our providers and get that information from them, because we just don't know. We don't have a clue on the labour, and our HR team are not familiar with international employees coming and acquiring labour rights over there. So that's the real challenge that we're seeing. It's the rest of it which most companies, I think, understand now over the last 10, 12 years, but that one is the one that's really something that people don't really have a clue about.
You're in a role that is really critical to people's, not just their careers, but actually their lives, right? Because you're looking around people with families and people that need to move for certain things. What are the current challenges that you're seeing? Are there any things, if you go back to March 2020, the world went into lockdown, nobody knew what was going, the shutters pretty much closed on a lot of companies. Everybody was in this sort of period, and then business had to go on, and they were looking like, we've got people in the wrong location, we can't get them back. I'm assuming that global mobility was one where you wanted that seat at the table. The seat at the table was there, and everybody wanted, an immediate response. What are the current challenges you're seeing? What have you sort of seen in terms of the last 18 months? Are there different requirements from the business? Are they being a bit more patient in terms of let's build a strategy, let's have that, or is it still that immediacy? We need to fix this.
I think from Sky's perspective, we're in the battle with technology and that sector where talent is so tough to recruit for at the moment, and the ask of being more and more flexible in terms of supporting that reach of obtaining that talent is now global, and that headhunting process, and how we can then still facilitate that hiring along with potentially not relocating to that standard office space. And the compliance that we're being asked more and more about around how we facilitate that. Can we pay them in local currencies? How often do they need to travel to the UK? How often in the office? It all clashes and contradicts itself. And I think that level of flexibility and therefore the strain that is putting on mobility functions to support the business, but clash with the incredibly complex or growing complexity of compliance in tax, social security, immigration, employment law.
I think a lot of people have been talking about being on a journey as a post-COVID pandemic situation, and we are still on a journey. We're all still trying to find ways of working. What's the best way of working? What's the best processes, policies for our people? For us in construction, it's quite easy in a way because we build buildings, we build infrastructure, so we need the workers on site. So it's very difficult for those people to be working from home because, you're pouring concrete. Yeah, we're all over our carbon cap, Mike. We've got a plan for that. We're pouring concrete, we're building rebar. You can't do that from home. Yep. So, a lot of the challenges that we have are limited, but then we still have some exceptional cases where we do need to look at them, and it's having to explain to the business that it's not all about the tax and the immigration. There are other implications where you've got automatic entitlement to employment rights in a country. There's data protection law, which is different. Insurances, from policies, from health cover, from everything you need to think of that would automatically be covered for your employee if they were still in the UK, but as soon as they step out the UK and work elsewhere, it's a minefield. It can be a minefield.
Yeah, it's still a strange period because, again, I don't want to get too political, but from my job for immigration, for example, a challenge we're having at the moment is hiring Russian nationals into the UK. The UK government is saying we can hire, it's fine, which is a message I'm obviously sharing with my team. But the reality is we're seeing quite long delays, and secondary to that, in terms of physically relocating someone from that location, you have to kind of work out the best route to do that. So you kind of have these really granular challenges, which, and to your point, you're not dealing with a product, you're dealing with a person. And I think that's what I relocated myself when I moved to Hong Kong, and I kind of empathize massively with being like, I don't understand visas, I don't understand any of it. So you kind of always have to come back to that point. So that's kind of a personal type example of challenges we're seeing. But also I think as well, to your question around what it was like during the pandemic versus now, I think during the pandemic, we saw a lot of governments, to your point, people were getting stuck. A lot of governments, for example, Singapore, were a lot more lenient on saying, look, there's people here that probably shouldn't be here, but it's fine. Now those kind of governments are closing up those, leniences, and we're having to consider now, are we going to see more audits? Are we going to see more stringent regulations? So it's educating the business that behaviors that they may have been able to do during the pandemic, like, oh, it's fine, they can be there for a couple of months. Now, it's almost like the horse has bolted and we're trying to bring it back in and educate. So it's a lot of education and spending time to keep that seat at the table, like you said. global mobility wasn't relevant during just COVID, it's relevant even more so now. So, yeah, I think it's just talking to the business a lot.
Yeah.
It's more the actual, the difficulty, I would say, that's just getting the business to actually understand that this is a consequence of implementing this for that specific person.
Yeah, you're not just saying no for a reason.
Exactly.
It's
if you want to do it, well, this is the consequence. What is more tricky, I would say, is when you are sending, well, not sending somebody, but somebody wants to work in a different country where potentially you don't have an entity and you've got to have another setup or register an entity, and then or the country allows it. So we've had exceptions, especially during COVID, where certain islands have allowed people to go and work remotely from there. But then if they go and have an accident, what happens? Who's covering them? What insurance is there? And I think it's them type of risks that haven't necessarily been fully taken on by the business. And at times we do spend a lot of time reminding them of basic security rules, and it's the CEO says kind of a barrier, but no, we're just kind of pre-warning you. Do what you want, but we're pre-warning. And it's the last thing you want is for an accident to happen because the guy is, I don't know, somewhere in Hawaii and he's gone surfing and he's had an accident and he's in a coma or something. What do you do?
And what we're seeing is, of course, because for quite a large part of the last 2 years, it didn't really matter where you worked because it was Zoom, Teams, whatever else we use. It didn't really matter, right, that where you were, because the work got done. So there's evidence to say, as talent approaches senior management and say, well, I've just done this for 2 years. Why do you care where I'm in Spain or Dubai, or why do you care? I've done my job. And that's quite a logical conversation, right? I've done my job, I'm a top performer, but those discussions are happening without any real knowledge of this stuff here, which is the stuff that authorities around the world were more forgiving of in the pandemic, but the pandemic, those easements have gone, so these things are now real, and I think everyone's tripping over those, aren't they? Okay.